Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Homegrown Musician. So if you actually own a working pair of ears, you could probably tell there was something a bit iffy with that piece of music at the beginning. So I'm not going to give the game away entirely, but it was something to do with a key signature. Now if you don't know what that is, not a problem, because that's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. So like I was saying, today's episode is going to be all about key signatures, so why we use them, what they are, and how to understand them. Now to understand key signatures, you first need to understand how to read pitch. So if you don't know anything about reading pitch or reading music in general, I highly advise going and watch my first little mini series, should take about 20 minutes in total, and then come back and watch this video. So I'll link to all of that below and up in the card above. So when you're listening to a piece of music, your brain is actually subconsciously picking out the relationships between all of the different notes. So it's listening to see how they interact with one another. You don't know it's doing it, but just through years and years and years of listening to music, it will automatically pick up these relationships. So with that being said, if we were to use... Okay, so it turns out that I'm actually a complete idiot, and when I was editing this video, I noticed that for some reason I keep saying we only have 11 notes available to us when there's actually 12 notes in the Western classical style. So I don't know why I keep saying this, but I do throughout the entire video, so I'm just going to really blatantly edit the word 12, and because this took like 3 days to make, and I really don't have time to refilm the whole thing. So yeah, look out for the mistakes if you see them. Or 12 notes at once, or at least in quick succession with one another, we'd be sending a lot of different musical signals. So certain relationships would want to take the music that way, other relationships would want to take the music this way, and as a result the piece of music might sound a bit muddled. Now that's not to say it can't be used to good effect, but in a sort of typical pop song it's not done very often. So typically, to avoid this confused sound, composers and performers will only take a selection of notes and they'll actually omit certain ones, so they'll only use a few that have very specific relationships to one another, as it helps to keep the music more focused. Now this is what's known as a key. So all a key is a selection of notes that you can use or that you can take from in order to keep a piece of music sounding focused. So if you want to be philosophical, there's no rule to say that you have to choose this amount of notes or these specific notes. If you wanted, you could choose these 3 notes or these 7 notes or these 9 notes. It doesn't particularly matter. So as time's gone on, a standard's been developed, and as a rule of thumb, most keys do have 7 notes in them with very specific intervallic relationships. Now that sounds quite complicated, but all an intervallic relationship is the distance between 2 notes. So in today's video, we're going to specifically focus on 2 very important key types, so major keys and minor keys. Now major keys sound like this, and they typically imply happiness in a piece of music, and minor keys sound like this, and they typically imply sadness in a piece of music. That's not to say all major songs are happy, and that's not to say all minor songs are sad, but typically the emotions we feel when we hear these keys are major is happy and minor is sad. So what is a major key and what is a minor key? So like I said it's all about intervallic relationships, or the distance between the notes, which is what make them sound the way they do. So first of all, we're going to focus on major keys. So to make a major key, choose any note. So literally choose any of 12 notes that we have available to us. For the sake of this exercise, I'm going to choose C because it's quite an easy key to read. So first step, like I say, is to choose a note, in this case C, and we label that our tonic. Now all tonic means is home, because this note is the most important note in the scale. It's the one that feels most at rest or most at home, and again that's because of the intervallic relationships between the other notes. They help point back towards your tonic. So how do we make a major scale? We have our tonic, and the next step is to build upwards to get the rest of the notes. So we need to follow a very specific pattern of intervallic relationships, and we'll actually get the notes we're looking for to make a major scale. So the order goes as follows: 2 semitones to get your second note, in this case D, 2 more semitones to get your next note, in this case E, 1 semitone to get your next note, F, 2 more semitones to get your next note, G, 2 more semitones to get your next note, A, and 2 more semitones to get your last note, B. And all of a sudden, we have a complete major scale. It's repeated and it's all the way back to C, and if you only use these 7 notes, you'll be playing a C major scale. Now this is true for any note, so if you start on any of the 12 notes that we have and use these intervallic relationships, you will make a major scale. So we've just made our first major scale. In this case, it's C major. So like I said, if you were to write or play a piece of music only using these notes, your brain would instantly go, we're in C major. So that's the whole point of a key. We just remove unwanted or temporarily unnecessary notes so that we can focus a piece of music, as like I said, certain keys have certain feelings and certain flavours. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is how to make a minor key. So we're going to do exactly the same thing but with slight differences in the intervals between the notes, and it should make our C major scale into a C minor scale. So again, we're going to start on the C, and this is our tonic. Now the first step of making a minor scale is exactly the same as making a major scale. Climb 2 semitones to get to D. Now the next step, climb 1 semitone, which is our first difference, to get to our third note, in this case E flat. After this, climb 2 semitones to get to our next note, in this case F. After this, another 2 semitones to get to our next note, G. Another difference, climb 1 semitone to get to our next note, in this case A flat. And finally, climb 2 more semitones to reach our last note, B flat. So when we put these two scales side by side, we can really clearly see and hear the differences. So both scales have a tonic of C, so our brains will instantly hear C as the tonic, but it's the intervallic relationships that will change the sound between the scales. So the 3 notes that really help to change the sound between a major and a minor scale are your 3rd note, your 6th note, and your 7th note. So after a quick Google, I found some really good examples of songs in both major keys and minor keys. So if you want to hear what a major key song sounds like, I recommend checking out Perfect by Ed Sheeran, All of Me by John Legend, and of course, All Star by Smash Mouth. Now for songs in a minor key, check out Camila Cabello's Havana, Wake Me Up by Avicii, and Money by Pink Floyd. Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of keys, why we use them and how they work. So why did that piece of music at the beginning sound so strange? So if we have a look at the harmony, we can clearly see that it's in A major, so it uses all of these notes. So I'll put them up here. Now if we look at the melody, we can clearly see that it's not in A major, it's in B flat major, so it's still a major key, but all of the notes in the melody are in a key 1 semitone above that of the harmony. Now if you look at the 2 sets of notes, one here and one here, you can see that there aren't many common notes between the two, and this causes clashes between the melody and the harmony. So if I shift all of my melody notes down 1 semitone from B flat major into A major, they'll match the harmony. Now have a listen and see how that sounds now. So that actually brings us to the end of today's video, so let's just have a quick review and recap so we can understand what we've actually learnt. We've looked at the 12 notes we have available to us and discussed how it probably isn't a good idea to play all 12 in quick succession of one another, as your piece of music will probably sound a bit muddled. From this we've talked about key signatures, which is pretty much just a composer or performer choosing a select few notes to give a piece of music direction and a sort of flavour. We've talked about arguably the 2 most important key signatures, both major and minor keys. We've talked about how to make them, how they work and how they sound, as well as giving some key examples so you can hear them in practice. And finally, we fixed that really weird sounding song that I played at the beginning and understood how the difference in key between the melody and the harmony created some really nasty clashes. Anyway, that should bring us to the end. Hopefully you've understood. If you did, give a like, maybe tell me what I could do better in the comment section below, and please like, share and subscribe as it would massively help the channel.